Well, good morning. Do you still have some brain cells so we can do some more of this? Thank you, Hannah, Rebecca. I'm going to tell you the reason why I show the videos. I work with the American Association of Christian Counselors, and I was a part of the mental health coaching program. And I'm going to give you an opportunity today, a little bit later on, I'm going to show a QR code where you can take this mental health coaching course, which has recently been revised. Plus, we have a whole nother module, which is for youth. And if you work with youth, and it's something that if you're a natural born helper and you have people in your life and you're the first responder and you're praying and you're with people, this is for you. And so here's the great news. We're going to make this available through an arrangement that I have since I was involved with it with the American Association of Christian Counselors. There's scholarships that are available. So today, if you'd like to take this course, and you have like a year to do it, or there's two courses, one for youth, that it'll be made available to you as a gift, 100% scholarship. So we want to resource you as much as we can, and this is a way that we can do that. So the mental health coaching and the youth, and it's just, in fact, a gentleman that's worked at the center for a long time just told me that he shared the video with his 17-year-old son. He said, and my son immediately signed up for the youth, and he's halfway through the youth course. So it's a certificate. You get a certificate. It's an accomplishment. You take these little things at the end called quizzes. Remember those from school? All right, that's the mental health coaching and the youth coaching. We're going to give that today as a gift. I want to introduce Brian Murphy. Brian Murphy's been at the center for a long time, like over 10 years. And Brian, for the longest time, was our program director, which he oversaw everything on a daily operational, working with clients and staff. Well, we are also honored to have Brian now working in a position called Outreach, National Outreach Director. He now lives in Spokane after all these years in Edmonds, and he came over to join us. And I just, so you know who Brian is, he's a good person to connect with if you have questions about the center or the work that we do. I want you to remember Brian, find him afterwards today. He's in that blue A Place of Hope sweater. Brian?
Hey, good morning. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Brian Murphy, and I have been working for Dr. Jantz for almost 11 years now. I started out as an addiction specialist. So I worked drug and alcohol for 13 years. I came to market Dr. Jantz in case people needed to go to inpatient treatment center. And true story, 10 days later, I was working for him. Jesus Christ is someone that has been part of my whole entire life. I worked for regular people long enough, and I was just drawn that I could talk about my relationship, how I grew up, and my faith can be talked about daily. It also came at a time when he was releasing a book about how to raise boys. And I had two little ones. I had a 4-year-old and 2-year-old at the time. Actually, they were 4 and 6. What I've been doing the last 10 years is just a gift. Overseeing a mental health treatment center. And I want to just make sure that everyone knows we're Christian-centered, Christian counseling facility. We're like a day program. People come and they live in Edmonds. We have housing that they can stay in. We're 6 days a week. And we listen to the clients that are there. They come 6 days a week. Sunday is for them. Services are like 6 to 8 hours a day. We treat anxiety, depression, addiction, eating disorder, trauma. Since I've been there, this is something that the other treatment center didn't do. I was there for 13 years and we didn't listen to the clients. Dr. Jantz personally gets everybody's survey for when they get done with treatment, and we listen to what they have to say. So we had a DBT program where the cognitive behavioral therapy is what we do. We teach skills. The therapists that are there are experts. We teach them to be experts, but we teach skills on how to calm down after a panic attack. We teach skills how to go into a situation that you don't want to go into, and you can do that. So people are getting jobs that they never thought that they could get, having families sending us postcards every year about how they're developing. But to do the work, you need to have the skills. So we teach that daily. We had a DBT class 2 days a week. The biggest complaint we had in 2015 and 2016, why are you only doing it 2 days a week? So we changed our entire curriculum. We start out every morning, 2-hour groups of DBT, and we teach skills. The one thing that I've learned working there in 10 years is listening to the client's experience and trying to add back to it. So we have a whole bunch of groups, but individual counseling. Dr. Jantz taught me this thing called whole person care. I was in Alcoholics Anonymous for a long, long time, 24 years now, but I definitely learned that there's people suffering in there. I saw the Celebrate Recovery sign when I drove up yesterday, and I was like, man, that is so cool that it's just right there. Like, there are different people suffering from different things in the world. This really drew to me because whole person care has so much more to do with it. So you get a gym membership if you come to treatment in Edmonds, because you have to have a place to be able to let your energy out. And it rains a lot over there, so it's good to have a gym. We have naturopath doctors. We have 2 naturopaths. They do cranial sacral therapy. We do IV therapy. We do a fitness assessment. Then we have 2 nutritionists. So each week you sit down with a nutritionist. If you're in an eating disorder program, you get to see her twice a week. And then you see a therapist 4 times a week. Then you have a psychiatrist visit you have 1 time a week. So I know I'm supposed to be brief, but I need to end with this. I've been through 2 state audits. So as the director, I read every file on everybody that's there. And both audits, these people would look at me and say, why are you giving away all these services? And I said, I don't understand what you're talking about. She said, you're only billing insurance companies. They only need to be here for 4 hours, some 5 or 6 hours. Your curriculum is like 8 or 9 hours a day, 6 days a week. Why are you feeding them? Why are you giving them housing? Why are you doing all this? And I said, because we can. There are different ways to heal people. Most of the people that I've treated that probably should not have been in our program because it was all-encompassing, they were really difficult. We can do that there. There is not a door that's locked. It's not an inpatient center. It's not scary. It is the best environment that you can go to. And the therapists that are there are amazing. The one thing I learned the first year in 2013 was how to talk to my kids. I was taught that this is how you talk to kids. And I had a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old at the time, and nobody ever explained that to me until I got to work in this environment there. Everything we do and say, and even how big we are. I'm 6'1". Like, I had no idea why my kids kept backing away. But it was the sound of my voice, and we have to change, and we can change, but you need to have a healing place to do that at. But Edmonds, Washington is not too far away. So thank you for the opportunity. I wanted to just talk about what we do there.
Okay, are we ready for more? Let's do it. This is a little bit on post-traumatic stress disorder. And I do want to acknowledge you for spending a Saturday half day here with us. honestly, you could be doing something else, but you're here, and we want this time to make a difference. So let's jump right into, I started to say more trauma, but I've had enough. Boy. Whoops. Okay, here we go. Part 2. You were here, most of you were here last night, right? Okay. So remember our definition of trauma? That is somewhat from a secular perspective, but it's going to cover it for us now. Trauma being an emotional response. We've been using that word a lot today, trauma, but we all know if we've had it because it hasn't left us. It has not left us. It is still recycling within us. And, we go through that shock and we go through that denial. And I had somebody earlier today that said, well, I didn't realize how much trauma I'd had. I just kept going. And that's what we do. We keep going or we tuck it away. And sometimes we forget how much it affected us. And I am reminded today, this is the Message version of the Bible, but I am reminded, because it's on the wall when you enter in the center, Jeremiah 29:11. But here's the good word. I will show up and take care of you as I promised. I will bring you back home. I know what I'm doing. I have it all planned out. Plans to care for you, not abandon you. Plans to give you the future you hoped for. And when you call on me and you come and pray to me, I'll listen. And when you're looking for me, you will find me. And when you're serious about finding me and you want it more than anything else, I will make sure you won't be disappointed. God's decree. Isn't that good? Because when you're in the depths and the despondency of despair, we don't always realize, no, God has plans, and the plans he has for us are good. Post-traumatic stress disorder, here we go. Now, what do you usually think of when you think of post-traumatic stress disorder? You think of what? Flashbacks. Sometimes we think of vets, or we think of war, and that would be common because it sure can fit there. But also, do we ever think of, well, if a person had a lot of abuse in their life, would they have post-traumatic stress disorder? Would they have some of the same symptoms? So let's look at this on a continuum. There is somebody earlier, the term complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Yes, and maybe we're going to go from some more mild symptoms and it gets worse and worse on that continuum. But let's as well look at the reality of this, that most of us are going to experience at least one trauma that could, keyword could, and we know that if we are exposed to it, trauma or injury increases the likelihood of developing post-traumatic stress disorder. 6% of the U.S. population will be able to be, and again, I don't always like diagnosing, but now I'm going to tell you that is, according to the National Center for Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder, but I'm going to say that number is probably a lot higher than 6%. Don't you think the last few years have added to this? And maybe what we're all still going through right now? And I'm just going to say, okay, I get those numbers, and that ultimately is from the Veterans Association through the government. But I'm going to tell you, our experience is the numbers are a lot higher. When somebody calls, this is what they're asking for help for. I have trauma. I don't know what to do. I am not functioning. I feel overwhelmed. Some days I feel like I'm okay. Other days I'm not functioning. That's post-traumatic stress disorder. Well, 4% of men, women more likely, veterans more likely if they've been involved in combat. And how about the person who is 8, 9 years old and they experienced sexual trauma. A person that's experienced rape, a person who was lived in a home where there was emotional abuse that was constant and dripping, that would be post-traumatic stress disorder. It can happen at any age. Now, the little video that I showed you, we focused there on young girls. Has social media affected young girls? Yesterday we mentioned that screen time for our 12 to 17-year-olds in that range is likely, if you add school into it, 16 hours a day. You think? And kids go to social media in herds. In other words, certain apps are popular for a while, and then the herd shifts and goes to another one. Snapchat was really it for a while. TikTok really it for a while. But what's happening now? Any app that is a live video feed, we're seeing migration towards that. What happens when our youth go into apps that have live video feeds? What do? Well, so often I'll just say it, so often it's not necessarily good. So often they're streaming things that are sexual, they're exchanging sexual content, and the instant video, they could be connected because it's worldwide, and some of these apps at any time, they are on them, and they're with somebody that is across the world. In certain countries, these apps and youth have grown in such popularity, in a matter of seconds, I can connect with somebody wherever and join in. And language doesn't matter because it's a video feed and it goes into very explicit content, usually pretty quick. That's the trend right now. Post-traumatic stress disorder, could you be traumatized by some of that? Is the brain getting things on an intense level that it was never designed to have? Absolutely. All right. When we look at childhood and teenage trauma, and this is just through protective services, but if we look at, what are they experiencing? 65% involve neglect, physical abuse, sexual abuse, and again, anything that we're pulling off for statistics. Now these are kids' lives, so it's not just statistics, but the numbers I'm going to say now are much higher as we come through the pandemic. Risk factors: how severe is it? How do parents react? How close or far away is the kid to the trauma? A tornado comes through town and destroys and displaces a family. Is that trauma? And for several years, they're living in a situation that is creating maybe even more stress. So we need to just kind of open up and not use the word trauma lightly, but we need to open up to different possibilities about what produces trauma. Symptoms. All right, some of this has been covered. I'm going to kind of move through it fairly rapidly. But we look at, what are the 4 areas that we always want to look for? Do I have intrusive memories? Am I at a place where I'm in the middle of my day and totally out of the blue, there's something called a flashback, and I don't even know what it was, but now I'm seeing those images of abuse that were many, many years ago. Or I'm having these thoughts that keep coming in and I cannot seem to control them. And for some, the escape is I take a pill, or I get high, or I drink. I've got to find a way to control these intrusive thoughts. The other one is avoidance. Number 2, avoidance. And this comes in different forms as well. If I can avoid people or situations that even remotely remind me of trauma, even remotely, then I'm going to be okay. So I'll avoid it. I will avoid relationships. It was a guy that abused me, so I'm going to avoid all relationships. I'm always going to move away from relationships. So avoidance of even dealing with it. I remember a gal who said to me, if I actually allow myself to think about it and talk about it, she said, I will lose my mind. I can never go there. That's how it felt, so overwhelming. I will lose my mind. And so then we avoid, forgetting that God has a future and hope. Negative changes, thinking and mood, that's a constant. If I have had trauma, one day I may feel like, hey, I'm doing okay. I'm doing all right. And then the next day, what happens? I am in the depths of despair. And I go, what happened? Because trauma can take me on a ride that I didn't want to be a part of. Trauma can take me where I never thought I would go again. Trauma can, because of trauma, send me back to similar relationships or similar abusers. And then I find myself back in similar situations. I've been trying to avoid them, but I find myself repeating patterns. All right. Changes in physical or emotional reactions. We've already talked about the hypervigilance and how the startle response can be really fine-tuned. There's also what I'm going to call a hypercriticalness. If I've had trauma in my life, I may have the tendency to have a very, very, and it's understandable, a very critical spirit. I can have a spirit that is so fast to assign blame to people. I can look at that person and just already decide, I prejudge them, I don't like them, and I can be harboring so much resentment that I am a specialist in blame and picking up offenses. Trauma causes me to be disabled in my relationships, so I'm going to judge, I'm going to be critical, I'm going to say nobody can help me, and I'm going to be very quick to blame. I will blame before I even have any information about a situation. I will judge. I will say that I was hurt in a church, and every church is that way, and I'll never go back. I'm judging everything. So that's a tendency, if we've had trauma in our life, to operate that way. Okay. Intrusive memories. Talked about that. I'm going to just say today, if you would like to get a set of the slides from last night or the slides from today, I'm going to be giving you an email before we close with that QR code, and just say I was there at the Mental Health Summit, and we will send these to you so you'll have them. Would that be all right? All right. Avoidance. Yeah, there we go. The lack of interest in previously enjoyed activities. Things that used to give you joy, you don't do anymore. Self-care and appropriately caring for yourself, it doesn't seem like it's worth it. And then you'll develop this sense of apathy. The term that psychologists are using right now is that we have it's a funny term, a foreshortened future. Foreshortened future just means that we have a generation that has apathy towards their future. They really don't have much hope for the future. So we see our futures as very short, that it doesn't really matter. Nothing's going to change, and I'm not going to change, so it doesn't matter. So you develop an apathy. The more apathy I have, the more depressed I become. Apathy and depression go hand in hand. You don't allow, the last one there, detached from positive, you don't allow any positive emotions. Again, to even think about having joy or a positive emotion. No, there's no room for a positive emotion. Trauma lies to us. Trauma takes us to a place, and there is a trauma tormenting because of what it does to your sense of value. That's why I began with the verse, there's hope. All right. Easily startled. Oh, self-destructive behavior. Let's mention that one. One that I'm seeing more and more right now is the self-destructive habit of like secretly binge eating. So the person may say, I don't go to alcohol. I don't do alcohol. I don't do drugs. But their secret is I binge eat. I eat a lot of food in a very short period of time, and that's my drug of choice. Could be I turn to the digital world and I escape through mindless TikTok. And by the way, I think there is something called a social addiction. Not an official diagnostic code, but if you ask a person who's really lost in the digital world, okay, how much time did you spend last night on Facebook? Oh, maybe an hour. It was really 5 hours. It's like asking a person who's struggling with alcohol, how many beers did you have? Well, I had one, but they had a whole 6-pack. We always diminish the actual quantity. Okay. Kids. You saw the video with the girls and how the girls are of particular concern right now because there's everything from gender confusion and there's messages that you are not okay. And in the video where they put the brick in the backpack and then there's the next brick, I'm carrying things as a young girl that I was never designed to carry. And there's not the freedom to be who God designed me to be. So, childhood trauma, I'm going to give you the slides. So I just want to add here that the post-traumatic stress disorder, it doesn't just suddenly appear. It is something that has probably been emerging for a while because maybe you felt like, well, I have depression. It's just depression. But then what happens is, as time goes along, you realize, man, I got a lot of anxiety, depression and anxiety. And you start to think, what is wrong with me? And then more symptoms emerge, intrusive thoughts, flashbacks, sleep is very disruptive. Find yourself waking up in the middle of the night and you're gasping for air, and your heart's pounding and you're in that cold sweat. And it's like you're having a panic attack in your sleep. So that's a part of it. So we just kind of add up, and the symptoms start to add up. And I get more symptoms over time. And what we found is a person tends to wait a long time before they get help. And then we hear fairly frequently, I wish I would have done something long ago. I allowed myself to suffer way too long. And a person will never regret getting the right kind of help. The right kind of help is really important. A person won't regret getting the right kind of help, but I will regret it if I don't do anything. You are not here. Okay, we're going to start moving into some more positive. You ready for that? Are you hungry and ready for lunch? Okay, hang on, it's coming. This is an interesting time right now to share with you. And I want to, Taylor is going to come up here towards the end, but don't anybody leave without at least initial plan for doing something? An initial plan means I may be going for prayer, I may find out what resources are available, but let's make sure we have the beginning of a plan today. Trauma is not something that can be avoided. Healing can happen for anybody who chooses it and works towards it. These are the truths. And we can, with God's help, learn to integrate the brokenness into who we are, but we have to take an active role in our healing. The evil one comes to kill and destroy, not to do anything. We tend to continue in a self-destructive pattern. It's predictable. We're a whole person, and you probably have heard this is really our bias, but we've got to deal with the whole person. Under the physical, trauma affects brain chemistry. Trauma affects us ultimately on the cellular level. Trauma could affect even things down to how I hold myself, my posture. A defeated person in their posture, it may show. I may have physical aches and pains that I go, what happened? And they're unexplainable. I may have gone to a physician numerous times because of things happening in my body or my digestion, and there's no good explanation for it, except for the trauma that happened. All right, the path to finding healing is to consider yourself a whole person, and that, again, I believe the key is addressing all these. But look at the spiritual side. I have mentioned before that one issue that on some level everybody has to figure out and walk through is the issue of forgiveness. The issue of forgiveness. It could be the forgiveness of what happened. It could be the forgiveness of the neglect. It could be the forgiveness of the severe trauma from somebody that was a bully. It could be physical trauma, domestic violence. It could be sexual trauma. I have to enter into a way to address forgiveness. And I'm not saying it's a one-time event. But if I don't attend to forgiveness, I will become bitter, I'll become resentful, and that will be a toxicity that affects all my relationships. It will make me sick, it'll make my immune system sick, and I've got to make sure that I move away from resentment and to be embittered. Some great scriptures as it relates to that as well. But the other forgiveness is the forgiveness of ourself. Maybe, as all of us had, you feel like you've made some poor decisions that put you in a situation and you're not happy with how you handled it. Maybe because of trauma, you turn to drugs, alcohol, other unhealthy relationships, and you're very angry at yourself because of how you've handled it. And there's self-forgiveness. There is something that happens as we begin to address that. Now, there is a trauma in our lives that can be so deep that I know it is the work of the Holy Spirit. It is the work of the intervention of God entering in and helping accomplish that forgiveness, because it's too big for us on our own. That's why we have to address the spiritual side. All right, which brings us to this. We are a child of God. And healing can happen when we take God at His word. What are we doing that is renewing our mind in God's word? Do I need to take a old-fashioned 3x5 card and write down a promise and carry that in my pocket? I said old-fashioned 3x5 card. I still use those. And pull it out during the day and saying God's word out loud, for God has not given me a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. Thank you for that reminder, and put it away, but reminding yourself, because we've got to have a system to renew our mind with what is true. Brian mentioned DBT and the DBT skills, which all sounds kind of funny until you learn what it is and go, because if you notice, we have CBT, DBT, RET. We have a lot of those little crazy acronyms, but the skills that we can learn. And we don't teach anything that we cannot tie back to a scriptural truth. Because let me say it, there are some really wacky things in the field of psychology. There are some trendy, unhealthy, I would never go that direction, things in the mental health field. As people become more desperate, we'll see people try more things that ultimately end up missing the mark for what they really need. We need to have discernment and pray for wisdom about what it is I need. But our teaching, or the things we do, we have to do things that would be in line with God's word. Seeking intimacy with God. This is where taking advantage of being prayed for, even when I don't feel it. This is where I am going to pray when I don't even believe it. This is where I'm going to practice, and I am going to be saying, God, not only do I need you, but I need to know your presence in my life. I can tell you God does reveal his presence in our life, and you will be able to say, God is at work. I know it. You will come to that. Gratitude. Now, gratitude's really interesting. As I begin to enter into healing, as I begin to grow, the little seeds of gratitude start to come up. And what do we mean by that? A number of years ago, and my wife's here, her name is LaFawn, and she's back at probably the book table. But a number of years ago, I think it was 12 years ago, LaFawn had the diagnosis of cancer. And we went on a whole course of chemo, and maybe you've gone through this, or you know, or you've had a loved one or a close friend. You know that journey immediately can activate fear. It can activate a lot of anxiety. And when you're receiving chemo and you've dropped to 90 pounds and you don't have any hair on your head and you look like you are dying, it seems like an odd time to practice gratitude. LaFawn had a tradition that she still shares today that began, I believe it was 12 years ago. And it was each day, no matter how she felt, each day, and it seemed like our period of time, I mean, we had a rough few years. But it was it felt like a long period of time. She would get out of bed, she would go to the same chair every day, and she was writing in a journal. And I didn't know it at the time, but eventually I asked. But she was writing a gratitude journal at the times of the greatest despair. At the times of the greatest unknowns about the future, she was writing gratitudes. And you can ask her today, but she's done this for 12 years. I don't know how many gratitude journals she's completed, but it's somewhere over 100,000 gratitudes that she's written down. And of course, there was that day that I asked her, well, am I in there anywhere? I'm just curious. But gratitude. But here's something so it sent me on a whole search to understand gratitude and what does it do, and when we really start to practice gratitude, what does that mean? And there's actually studies on gratitude. And to think, we've actually spent money studying gratitude to see if it makes a difference in a person's life. One of the most famous studies, they didn't call it a gratitude study, but it was one of the things they were looking at, was actually it was a few years ago, but it was a 40-year, what we call longitudinal study over time at Harvard University, and it dealt with men. Can you imagine being a guy, and for 40 years, every year you had to report in, answer certain questions, and you don't know what they're measuring. You're just a part of the study. And after 40 years, there was a lot of things they discovered, but one of the things they discovered is that men who scored higher in optimism, and optimism is a byproduct of gratitude, men, this is only with men, who scored higher in optimism, actually lived longer, had fewer health concerns, and number 3, reported happier, healthier relationships. But these guys didn't know what they were studying. Gratitude, now we know, it can take some time. I don't say any of this is magical, but the way God designed our brain, the more that we focus on His Word and gratitude, things change. And there actually are some studies that have been done to see, does gratitude change brain chemistry? Gratitude tends to raise dopamine levels, that's kind of the feel-good chemical, as well as serotonin, which has a lot to do with mood and sleep. So there's a lot of benefit to gratitude. And I lived it and watched it personally. And when I asked LaFawn about it some time ago, she said it was one of the things that God used, I think, she said, to save my life. Gratitude. When we look to God's power, I just wanted to mention gratitude. And I know we've all heard this verse from Philippians, not to be anxious about everything, but by prayer and petition and with thanksgiving, make our requests known. So don't give up on this. And guard our hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Even if we don't understand fully what that means, let's do it. Even if we don't get it, we don't feel like we're seeing any results, let's keep it up over and over. Deepen our faith. Now, this is where groups and Celebrate Recovery, this is where the appropriate, good, healthy support groups can be quite an important key. And what we're looking at is, am I involved in things that are growing my faith, or am I spending my evenings in isolation on social media or Facebook and then feeling worse about my situation? What am I doing to foster renewing my mind, growing my faith, and who am I spending my time with? The power of being with the right people at the right time in your life is a part of the transformation. Oftentimes we hear after somebody has left the center, they met somebody, and in fact I had somebody here today, no, it was yesterday, who told me I was at the center 30 years ago. 30 years ago. I go, yeah, we've been here 40 years, so we were there 30 years ago. And he mentioned it was transformational, but I met somebody who was there at the same time, and we've had a relationship for the last 30 years. And that was a part of my healing. Prayer. When you don't know what to pray, pray the scriptures. All right. So back to those index cards. Some time ago, many years ago, LaFawn created, I don't know how many they were, but it's a stack of verses on a 3x5 card. And had one of those big rings, you punched a hole in it, and she would keep these verses near her, and every day, it was one of those huge rings with lots of verses, she was reading God's word through just the verses. She still has that stack of those cards on that binder. And not long ago, we had a friend who was diagnosed with cancer as well. And I noticed that LaFawn sat down and wrote out all these verses and shared it with this, but she put the person's name in the verses. And just the power of speaking God's truth. I cannot overstress how important that is. All right. This is a good one. If you can't pray by yourself, pray with a trusted friend. Have somebody that's going to be faithful in speaking into your life. Allies. These are people that believe. Now, here's a key importance if I'm working through trauma. I want to work with a doctor, a counselor, a team, or individuals who believe in my ability to get well. I don't want to go see a doctor who gives me a diagnosis and speaks as though there's no hope. Have you had that experience? Yeah, where they go, here's the diagnosis, we'll see what we can do, can't make any guarantees, and you are left on an island feeling alone. Always work with people who really sincerely have a belief in your ability to get well. Whether it's a counselor, and you'll know it. You'll know it. Your spirit will speak to you. You will know if they believe. And I really realized that I have changed physicians personally because of how the physician was speaking to me and I knew that they did not believe in my ability to make changes or get well. And so I made a decision. No, I'm going to work with somebody else. Right? Having good allies. All right. Here's the part I wanted to share with you. That QR, boy, everything's a QR code these days, right? That QR code will be your scholarship for either the youth mental health piece or the mental health coaching piece that's recently been updated and revised. You get a year to finish it, and it really is a gift. Now there is, I don't know what it is right now, there's a technology fee, but it's not very much. The whole course is free because you do it, it's an online is what it is. So, and you're welcome to share that. I don't receive anything from it. It's entirely free. It's a part of resourcing you, and you will see all the topics that are covered in that course. And I just want to empower you. Learn, and learn from the right sources. And today, you may have known somebody that needed to be here this weekend. Here is what I want you to do. I want you to email info at aplaceofhope.com. Info at aplaceofhope.com. Just say I was at the Mental Health Summit, that it was great, and I to say I was here. And we will send you the slides of all this from last night and today. Would that be helpful? Okay, good. And so you don't have to say anything more. Just send me the slides and we'll take care of it. One more time on the email, info, I-N-F-O, at aplaceofhope.com. And just another way of resourcing you. And I also want to personally thank Pastor Mark and all that Pastor Mark has done to really bring this together and seeing the importance. And Rebecca and Hannah, who they really are here in the local area as a wonderful resource. And I am very grateful for the relationships that we have in your community. And that is highly valued. And I trust that last night and today has been of help and interest. And be sure that you don't leave without a beginning of an action plan, either for you or for whoever you're concerned about.